They clapped for the chief executive's son right in front of me, treating me like a ghost in my own boardroom. Those smiling executives had no idea the strategy they were praising was a complex survival system that only its creator could actually operate. I did not scream or beg for my stolen credit. I simply placed my plastic employee badge on the glass table, walked out, and let them drive their stolen ship straight into a hurricane. My name is Daniel Vance. I am 54 years old, and until about 5 minutes ago, I was the director of operational strategy at Apex Cargo Systems. Sitting in the glass boardroom on the 25th floor in Columbus, Ohio, I felt the burn of exhaustion to behind my eyes. The heavy folder held the pulse of the company. It was a dense blueprint that had cost me 6 months of sleepless nights, lukewarm coffee, and missed dinners. I knew every terrifying financial projection and every operational cut required to keep the lights on. Apex Cargo Systems was standing on the edge of a cliff. We had 3 major distribution centers hemorrhaging cash every single day. Our freight contracts were bloated, bleeding millions due to outdated penalty clauses. The entire supply chain was a chaotic mess following 3 consecutive quarters of failures. The air in the boardroom was thick with unspoken panic. The document resting under my hands was not just a polite corporate suggestion. It was a detailed restructuring plan. I had personally mapped out the process to amputate 2 deeply unprofitable regional markets. I had drafted the terms renegotiating with primary suppliers, realigned the transit network to eliminate dead routes, and built a strict week-by-week implementation roadmap. It was a survival guide, calibrated down to the very last cent. I had built it from raw, ugly, fragmented data, pulling numbers from reluctant managers and matching them against cold reality. The massive screen at the front of the room hummed quietly as the final slide of the deck faded to black. The room was quiet. Then, the scraping of a chair broke the silence. Maxwell Stone, our lead investor, stood up at the far end of the long table. He looked around the room, a wide smile breaking across his face. He started to clap, a slow, deliberate, booming applause. "Brilliant," Maxwell said, his voice echoing sharply against the glass walls. "Truly brilliant, Braden. I have to say, this is exactly the kind of company-saving vision we have been waiting to receive." He offered the room a smile that was the calculated mixture of false humility and quiet confidence. "Thank you," Maxwell Braden said, his voice smooth and steady. "It has been a grueling process, naturally, but true leadership in a crisis means making the hard choices. It means seeing the forest for the trees and having the courage to execute a clear vision, no matter how painful the cuts might be." He spoke the words with the gravity of a leader. He did not mention the strategy department or the endless nights my team endured. He simply claimed the entire 6 months of my blood, sweat, and data as his own personal, undeniable triumph. All around the table, the other board members were nodding in unison. I had dealt with Braden taking credit for my ideas before. In this industry, a certain amount of intellectual tax was just considered the tax you paid to play the corporate game. I was used to him presenting my minor logistical adjustments as his own strokes of genius. But this was entirely different. This was outright, shameless daylight robbery, right in front of the board of directors and the primary investors. An icy calm washed over me. I would be buried alive under the heavy foundation of my own hard work, forever serving as the invisible engine to Braden's shiny exterior. I reached up to my lapel. I unclipped it. I placed the badge flat on the table. It slid a few inches. I closed my laptop with a sharp click. Braden glanced over, a tiny, deeply annoyed crease forming between his brows. I stood up. The entire room went instantly dead silent. Maxwell Stone paused entirely mid-sentence, his mouth hanging slightly open. "I resign," I said. It did not shake. It carried no obvious anger, no dramatic tears, no desperate plea for recognition, effective immediately. "Daniel, what in the world are you trying to say? We are right in the middle of a board meeting. You cannot just leave." I did not look at him, nor did I look at Braden. I simply picked up my laptop and tucked it securely under my left arm. I walked directly toward the heavy glass door. My footsteps were steady and measured on the carpet. I stepped out of the room entirely ready to let them drive themselves directly into the devastating storm they had just stolen from me. It was the culmination of exactly 120 days of relentless, punishing labor. For 6 solid months, my entire existence was reduced to grueling shifts lasting 12 to 14 hours a day. While the executive floor floated in a comfortable bubble of summary reports, I was down in the filthy, grinding machinery of the actual business, trying to stop the bleeding. I remember standing in a freezing loading bay in Illinois at 4 o'clock in the morning, holding a clipboard packed with raw, terrifying operational data. They do not understand that our secondary transport drivers are legally mandated to rest. We are bleeding out here. I listened to Liam and managers just like him across 5 different states. I hunted down every single hidden penalty clause, every delivery metric that our bloated legal department had blindly approved 3 years prior. I painstakingly cross-referenced the actual devastating operational costs against the financial reports that the board of directors was being fed. It was borderline catastrophic. I built the entire restructuring model from that ugly, unforgiving truth, cell by spreadsheet cell, formula by complex formula. Braden Sinclair was exactly where he always was, comfortably detached from anything resembling actual work. If a critical working session was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the morning, Braden would casually stroll into the conference room at 10 o'clock. He would listen to my breakdowns for 10 minutes, nod solemnly, and then stand up abruptly. "Phenomenal groundwork, team," Braden would say, flashing a polished, entirely hollow smile at the room. "Keep working on the details. Daniel, make sure you send me the executive summary by 5 o'clock so I can review it." He never asked how the proposed route consolidations would actually affect our driver retention rates or our warehouse turnaround times. He only cared about the glossy executive summary, the sleek, bullet-pointed slide deck he could ultimately present to his father and the wealthy investors to mathematically prove he was actively managing the crisis. Over the past 2 years, I had been forced to watch my intellectual property be systematically stripped away and seamlessly grafted onto Braden's resume. It started small and insidious. Braden would immediately shoot it down, calling it too risky. Then, on Thursday afternoon, he would present the exact same pivot to the senior directors, confidently swapping the word pivot for strategic realignment and accepting their praise without a flinch. Initially, my name was printed below the title, then quietly moved to the secondary contributors list. Eventually, my name was entirely banished to the tiny font at the very bottom of the final page. While the senior leadership team held dinners to discuss the future of the company, my inbox remained completely empty. I was strictly forbidden from crossing the invisible velvet rope that separated the people who did the work from the people who took the credit. After 2 years of watching my career be casually cannibalized, something inside me turned to pure ice when I began building this final survival model. I knew the financial stakes were too high this time. So, unlike the past 2 years, I did not just work hard. I worked defensively. Every single time I updated the primary forecasting model, I saved a duplicate file on an encrypted personal drive, carefully preserving the digital metadata that proved my authorship. I archived every email where Braden delegated the workload to me, specifically citing his lack of bandwidth. I securely saved the raw data sheets I had pulled directly from the warehouse servers. I even kept the digital trails of the external drafts I had sent to our independent logistics auditors for verification. The definitive, undeniable proof of their malicious intent arrived exactly 1 week before the board presentation. I had finished finalizing the master deck. But the absolute most important part of that document was the final appendix. In that specific appendix, I had explicitly detailed the absolute unalterable sequence of the implementation phase. Furthermore, at the very bottom of that crucial page, I had formally listed myself as the chief architect of the operational model, strictly mandating that any deviation from the precise sequence required my direct, written approval. It was a necessary safety mechanism. 7 days before the board meeting, I logged into the highly secure shared drive to do a final check. I opened the master file. The appendix was completely gone. It was surgically, intentionally extracted. They had deliberately stripped away the critical operational warnings, and they had erased my existence completely. They wanted the company-saving numbers I had produced, but they wanted to completely scrub the man who calculated them from the historical record, so the son could wear the crown unchallenged. I did not cry. I did not draft an angry email. When I walked toward that glass boardroom 1 week later, my heavy briefcase weighed down with the freshly printed, compromised DOSes. I was not hoping Donald Sinclair or the investors would suddenly see my true worth. I knew Braden was going to steal my life's work. I knew his father was going to proudly bless the theft. They were not just stealing a promotion, they were stealing the defining achievement of my career to prop up a man who could not even comprehend the strategy he was holding. I stepped into that room, knowing the fuse was already lit, fully prepared to walk away and let the explosion consume them. Without my hand violently gripping the steering wheel, Braden Sinclair decided to execute the complex restructuring plan according to his own shallow, cosmetic interpretation. With the end of the fiscal quarter rapidly approaching, he desperately needed a massive reduction in overhead to justify the board of directors' blind faith in his leadership. It was the strategic equivalent of yanking the concrete foundation out from under a towering skyscraper just to save a few dollars on the ground floor. In the mathematical model I had built, closing the Louisville terminal was strictly slated for the 9th week of the rollout phase. The system needed a bypass before you could sever the main artery. Braden completely ignored the sequencing. He just wanted the instant cash savings to appear on the quarterly balance sheet. The moment the Louisville terminal locked, the regional supply chain violently buckled. Tractor trailers were abruptly rerouted in mid-transit to smaller facilities that completely lacked the square footage, the docking bays, or the manpower to receive them. Delivery times skyrocketed from 48 hours to 96 hours, and in several sectors, delays stretched over 120 hours. Furthermore, because Braden ordered the immediate layoff of all 200 employees at the Louisville terminal without any advance notification, he triggered a severe violation of the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, also known as the Warren Act, under Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 2101. The law mandates a 60-day written notice before any mass layoff. And with those massive delays came the automated triggers. I had spent weeks mapping out the penalty clauses, hidden deep within our carrier contracts. The catastrophe did not stop at the loading docks. A major part supplier based in Michigan went ballistic on a Tuesday morning. They entirely missed the 30-day written notice clause that I had marked as off-limits due to our heavy reliance on their specialized inventory. The supplier immediately retaliated by freezing all inbound shipments of replacement axles, heavy-duty tires, and brake pads. Down in the trenches, regional operations directors watched their networks collapse in real time. They started calling the executive floor relentlessly, begging for solutions. It was a beautiful map drawn by a man who had never actually walked the treacherous terrain. Under immense, suffocating pressure from Donald Sinclair to maintain the illusion of control, the finance team attempted to mask the catastrophic weekly operational losses. They started clumping the daily deficit numbers into rolling, obscure monthly averages, desperately trying to smooth out the terrifying spikes in operating costs before the major investors noticed the bleeding. Maxwell Stone's team of quantitative analysts expected to see a sharp 10% reduction in operating expenditures by the end of the first 30 days. Instead, their software was flagging a totally stalled logistics network, soaring fuel costs, and an alarming spike in carrier contract penalties. The glorious narrative Braden had sold them was actively unraveling in real time, and the numbers were screaming that something was fundamentally broken at the core of the company. The most dangerous realization, however, was happening quietly inside the private office of Margaret Ross. Disturbed by the sudden, chaotic operational reports crossing her desk, she sat down and opened her secure email server. She dug through her archives and pulled up the preliminary prep meeting documents she had received several weeks before the infamous boardroom presentation. She began reading them side-side, line by line. The discrepancy was not just minor, it was glaringly obvious. The final version, the one Braden proudly claimed as his ultimate vision, felt remarkably hollow by comparison. It lacked the crucial warning appendix, and it completely erased my name from the authorship credits. Margaret slowly realized she was looking at two entirely different operational languages. The very next morning, My newly established professional corporate email account registered a secure notification from a senior partner at Maxwell Stone's venture fund. It was politely disguised as a standard industry inquiry about Mendoza operational advisory, but the underlying subtext was screaming. I closed my laptop screen, a slow, deep sense of satisfaction warming my chest. The story was nowhere near over. The real devastating drama was just beginning to crack wide open from the inside out, and gravity was doing exactly what I knew it would do. The empire was falling, and I was the only person holding the net. The sender was an unregistered number, but the text contained a private access code to a highly secure audio bridge. I typed in the passcodes and dialed in. He sounded deeply fatigued, yet intensely sharp. "I appreciate you taking the call at this hour." "This is not a casual consultation," he said, the exhaustion briefly giving way to a cold, predatory edge. "This is a forensic post-mortem on a train wreck. I need you to know something right now." During that final boardroom presentation, the very moment Braden opened his mouth and started advancing the slides, my instincts were screaming that he was reciting a foreign language. He had the smooth, practiced cadence of a salesman, but he completely lacked the underlying friction of someone who had actually wrestled with the heavy mathematics. He was floating above the details, totally unburdened by the gravity of the actual execution. Maxwell paused, the heavy silence stretching over the secure line. "I still have the preliminary exit strategy draft you sent to my private office exactly 6 weeks ago," Maxwell continued. "The one you sent requesting my direct feedback on the regional withdrawal phase. I had my internal technology team pull the file history yesterday afternoon. The digital metadata is absolute and undeniable. Your digital signature is permanently embedded in every single cell, macro, and pivot table. Braden's name does not exist anywhere in the foundational architecture. Margaret Ross also reached out to me quietly this morning," Maxwell said, lowering his voice. She was deeply suspicious of the chaotic operational reports she was receiving. She dug through the raw, unedited archives from the board portal. She found the missing appendix. She found the 3 mandatory conditions that were mysteriously absent from Braden's final deck. And most importantly, she found the massive red flag you raised regarding vendor termination. That was the exact moment the scattered, seemingly unrelated puzzle pieces abruptly snapped together in my mind, forming a picture far more corporate than simple plagiarism. I opened my encrypted drive while Maxwell was still speaking, pulling up my original, unredacted slide deck. I navigated straight to the final, deleted appendix. There it was, the 3rd bullet point under vendor consolidation. The specific supplier I had explicitly marked for immediate, non-negotiable termination, Horizon Transport. "Horizon Transport," I whispered to the empty room. "Exactly," Maxwell confirmed, his voice devoid of any warmth. It was never just about Braden's fragile ego. It was not merely a desperate, incompetent son trying to steal a strategy to secure a promotion and impress his father. It was a calculated, high-stakes financial cover-up. Horizon Transport was not just another underperforming logistics contractor. They were deeply, historically embedded in Donald Sinclair's personal network. The chief executive officer of Horizon Transport was a fixture at Donald's country club, a frequent weekend guest at his summer estate, and a co-investor in several of the Sinclair family's private real estate ventures. In my physical, ruthless pursuit of operational efficiency, I had identified Horizon Transport as a massive bleeding wound in our supply chain. Their hauling rates were 25% higher than the current industry standard, and their delivery failure rate was hovering dangerously around 12%. My mathematical model mandated severing their contract completely to free up millions of dollars in liquid capital. Braden did not just delete my name from the title page to claim the glory. He and his father deliberately deleted the appendix to protect their lucrative, highly unethical political alliance. They prioritized their country club relationships over the actual survival of Apex Cargo Systems. But by keeping Horizon Transport active, they had fundamentally corrupted the entire cost-saving equation. My model was a tightly wound, highly calibrated clock. If you refused to remove the broken gear, the entire mechanism would inevitably tear itself to shreds. That was exactly why the regional operations were currently spiraling into absolute chaos. They were desperately trying to achieve my savings targets while carrying the dead weight of Donald Sinclair's cronyism. It gets significantly worse, Daniel, Maxwell said. That refinancing package was underwritten based strictly on the financial projections and milestones detailed in your specific model. The board determines that there was a deliberate misrepresentation of the core assumptions, constitutes a breach of our financial covenants. This means the investment group has the legal authority to trigger an executive sweep due to fraud in the inducement under common law. I stated, the brutal legal terminology tasting like sharp iron on my tongue. Exactly, Maxwell replied. We can legally force an immediate change in the executive management structure. We can clear out the entire suite, starting with Donald and ending with Braden. But I need the architect. I need the singular person who can step into a hostile room, tear their corrupted rollout apart, and mathematically prove how the deception was engineered to protect private interests. The call ended shortly after, leaving me sitting in the quiet hum of my home office. Donald Sinclair had compromised his fiduciary duty to protect his personal wealth network, and he had used his son's fake, glossy presentation to blindfold the investors while he executed the theft. The Sinclair family thought they had simply silenced an annoying middle management strategist. They had absolutely no idea they had accidentally handed me the master key to their entire kingdom. I was holding the exact, heavy, unyielding lever required to permanently dismantle their dynasty. The stakes had escalated overnight from mere vindication to total corporate annihilation. I closed the encrypted drive, a dangerous calm settling over my mind. I was methodically preparing to be their executioner. The phone rang at 11:15 on a Thursday night. I was sitting at my kitchen island reviewing the initial incorporation documents for Mendoza Operational Advisory. The caller identification displayed Donald Sinclair. Daniel, Donald said, his voice thin, rasping, and full of stress. We are experiencing some unexpected friction with the rollout. The implementation is facing some severe operational headwinds. The board feels we could benefit from your granular expertise to help support the transition. Friction, headwinds, support. It was almost comical how he refused to use the word failure. I did not interrupt him. I let him stumble through a few more painful sentences about supply chain bottlenecks, vendor miscommunications, and unforeseen logistical gridlocks. He was bleeding out, and he was trying to ask for a bandage without admitting he had been stabbed. He wanted to pretend this was just a minor course correction, a small favor from a former loyal employee. I am not an employee of your company anymore, Donald, I said, my voice perfectly level, cold, and entirely devoid of any sympathetic warmth. If you are calling to retain my firm's services, we can discuss a contract. But you are absolutely not bringing me back to quietly fix a mess in the background, while your son continues to smile for the cameras. Fine, Donald conceded quickly, a sharp exhale hitting the phone's microphone. Whatever title you need to feel comfortable, just come in tomorrow morning and look at the logistics network. We need to stabilize the Midwestern routes. My title is independent consultant, I corrected him, and my terms are strict and non-negotiable. First, my consulting fee is exactly 3 times my former annual executive salary, prorated for the duration of the contract. I require a 30% non-refundable retainer wired into my corporate account before I even step foot inside your office. Furthermore, I require absolute unrestricted administrative access to all real-time operational and financial data. No redacted files, no restricted folders. 3 times? Daniel, that is an exorbitant figure. I cannot possibly justify that to the finance committee. We are bleeding cash. Then you can explain to the finance committee why your entire freight network is paralyzed and your primary vendors are preparing massive breach of contract lawsuits. I replied coldly. My second condition is that I report exclusively and directly to the board of directors and the primary capital investment group. There will be absolutely no family filter between my findings and the people who hold the purse strings. Third condition, every single piece of strategic documentation will carry my name as the sole architect. I want my name restored to the master deck. And the fourth condition, Braden Sinclair is strictly forbidden from attending any technical meetings or strategy sessions that I lead. Furthermore, he is immediately stripped of all decision-making authority, regarding the implementation of the recovery model until the board completes a full, independent review of the current crisis. You cannot banish my son from his own department, Donald snapped. That is public humiliation. You are asking me to castrate him. It is operational triage, I said sharply. He is actively crashing the plane. I am taking away his pilot license. You can either accept these terms right now, or you can call Maxwell Stone in the morning and tell him you chose your son's fragile pride over his massive financial investment. Send the contract to the legal department, Donald whispered, his voice completely defeated. The line went dead. By 9 o'clock the following morning, the contract was signed, and the retainer fee had successfully cleared into my bank account. The elevator ride up to the 25th floor felt entirely different this time. Weeks ago, I had descended these very same shafts feeling like a ghost, an invisible, disposable asset whose life's work had been hijacked. Now the heavy metal doors parted to reveal a totally transformed atmosphere. The executive floor was humming with a thick, suffocating, nervous energy. Assistants carrying thick stacks of paper. I walked past my old cubicle and the vice president's door. I did not look for Braden. I was directed to a private corner office with a view of the city, a conference table. I placed my heavy briefcase onto the polished wood. I opened it and pulled out my laptop. I did not return to this building as a wounded, desperate employee. I returned as an apex predator. I was the only person within a 100-mile radius who possessed the living map required to navigate them out of the hurricane. The air in the boardroom was completely different this time. I stood at the exact spot where Braden had stood, opening with a brutal clinical autopsy of the company's current massive hemorrhage. Delivery times jumped from 48 hours to well over 100 hours. Bleeding roughly $2 million in operational fines in just 14 days. I invited their questions, and they came like rapid fire. I answered every query immediately, providing compliance codes, contract penalty formulas, and accrual rates. Daniel, he began, who built the foundational architecture of this recovery model? I tapped a key on my laptop, bringing up the metadata log. What you are looking at is the complete digital forensic history of the restructuring project, I explained, using a laser pointer. This timeline spans exactly 6 months. Over that period, the master strategic file was opened, edited, and saved exactly 412 times. Next to every save is my user identification code. You will see the timestamps running past 2 o'clock in the morning. My digital fingerprints are permanently embedded in every single macro and pivot table. I clicked the remote to show Braden's footprint. This is the vice president of strategy, I said cleanly. You will notice there are exactly 0 edits, 0 data contributions. The only recorded activity associated with his account is a single read-only access log, registered less than 24 hours before he stood in this room and presented my work as his own original vision. I scrolled to the deleted appendix. Taking unearned credit is merely an issue of executive ego. What happened next is a matter of catastrophic negligence. Braden deleted Appendix Section 4, which established 3 absolute non-negotiable prerequisites. First, the Louisville hub could not be closed until the Indiana and Tennessee relief lines were fully operational. Furthermore, I placed a strict red flag on Horizon Transport. My data proved their hauling rates were 25% above the market average, coupled with a completely unacceptable failure rate of 12%. Braden and his father deleted this appendix to protect their private country club connections, prioritizing personal relationships over the survival of Apex cargo systems. Margaret Ross was the first to break the paralysis. Given the extreme severity of these forensic revelations, Margaret announced, I am motioning for the formation of a special independent review committee. This committee will launch a full investigation into the file access logs, the fraudulent misattribution of strategic credit, and the conflicts of interest surrounding the Horizon Transport vendor relationship. I expect compliance from the executive suite. Donald slowly closed his mouth and stared blankly at the table, looking suddenly very old and defeated. The board voted unanimously. Donald Sinclair was permanently removed from his position as chief executive officer, and Braden Sinclair was stripped of all strategic roles. They approved my exact rescue package, granting my firm a 5-year exclusive consulting retainer, and a 25% equity stake in the newly formed logistical analytics unit. When the meeting adjourned, Braden Sinclair walked out in absolute, freezing silence. His executive career was permanently over. Donald was quietly ushered into forced retirement. As for me, I did not ask for my old desk back. I walked out possessing absolute, unbreakable control over my own name, my own income, and the entire trajectory of my professional future. At the absolute end of the fiscal year, Apex Cargo Systems published its annual shareholder report. Right there, printed on the second page, was a summary of the logistical turnaround that had saved the company from bankruptcy. My name was printed exactly where it belonged. The board explicitly named Daniel Vance and my independent advisory firm as the sole architects of the restructuring strategy. On a bitterly cold Columbus afternoon, I stepped out of the glass doors of the headquarters for the final time. The wind whipped through the streets, but I felt warm. I did not look back. I had finally learned that the most perfect, devastating form of revenge is not screaming at your enemies. The ultimate, flawless revenge is methodically forcing the very system that tried to crush you to legally sign a binding document confirming that every single brilliant thing keeping them alive was created entirely by you.